Happy Friday and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sonnet, the owner and creator behind Sonnet's Garden Blooms. And in today's video, you guys are getting a thrift to treasure. So I went into my inventory, also known as my stash. I pulled out a few items and we are flipping them in today's video. For project one, I thrifted this ages ago. I mean, it was last summer and it has been sitting in my stash. I was very torn though. Do I sell it as is or do I do an upcycle to it? I paid $1.99 for it. I don't think it was half price, but it was that long ago that I don't even remember. Looks like originally $8.99. So what I decided to do with this piece is I'm going to add white swan and we're going to use the leftover paint inlay. Now this is lattice rose and it was from the last IOD release. I have used every little bit of this paint inlay and now I'm starting to use use it a second time and a third time, but this is the only piece that I have left that is going to be the first time use. So when you are using a paint inlay, you do want to apply one coat of a chalk style paint, or I'm using DIY paint, which is a clay style. I'm gonna let it dry, then we're gonna come back, we're gonna add that second coat of paint and then put the paint inlay in there. My vision for this piece is I want to add that strip of rose. I want to add on each of the smaller pieces of wood. And then in the center, I'm going to leave it just white and we are going to put that vintage fork right in the center. I just thought it was so cute, this little tiny fork. I thrifted it. It was actually at Goodwill in the regular fork, spoon, and knife bin. You never find vintage silverware in there, but I did find it. And it actually fits on this piece perfectly. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting out the center. I'm leaving those other two strips for one last project. Maybe in Monday's video, I will come up with something to use those, but I am setting those aside for a future project. Now I'm lining it up. I want to make sure I get as many of the roses on here as possible. Once I figure out where I want to cut it, I cut each of the pieces and then we're going to go in and add the additional paint and start using the paint inlay. If you have yet to use a paint inlay or you are scared to use one, it is super simple. The key is you want to have one layer of a chalk style paint. I'm using DIY's White Swan, which is actually considered a clay-based paint, so either or. And then once that top coat or that first coat is dry, you go in and you add a second layer of paint. Now you want to add just a little bit more, like a thicker layer of that paint, and when it is still wet, what I recommend doing is taking a misting bottle, misting your paint inlay. And the key is there are two sides to a paint inlay. The back side, which has the grid lines, and then the side with the paint inlay on it. That is the side you'll want to mist. And once you mist it, then you lay it down into the wet paint. And it's very similar to how you would apply decoupage paper. You want to have as least amount of wrinkles as possible. So I always start on one side and I then lay it down to the other and then smooth it out with my finger. Or you can use a brayer. And then I do the exact same thing to the other side. Once I have that all in, I'm going to take my misting bottle and I'm going to mist the entire piece of the paper. And then I'm going to take my finger again and just really rub on that paint inlay to really make sure that it is embedded into the paint. You can then zap it with a heat gun or you can just set it aside and let it dry. Once it's dry, then we're going to come back and we're going to remove the paper and show you what the paint inlay looks like. Now that it's dry, I'm taking my misting bottle again. I am remisting each of the pieces of the paint inlay Once you have that wet enough, then what you're going to do is you're going to start on one end and you are going to start peeling your paint inlay back. And this is so satisfying. I love seeing that paint inlay embedded in that paint, and it looks so good. It looks like it's hand painted. So I do that to both sides. Now, one thing I did not show you on camera was when I was smoothing it all out, there was a spot on here that on the very end where I actually smeared the paint inlay. So I'm going to fix that, and it's super simple. I had one little chunk of the paint inlay left, so I am applying a bit of paint to that spot where it's smeared, and we're going to just redo that spot, and it blends perfectly. The paint is wet. I'm going to remist that little bit of the paint inlay and then embed it in there, let it dry, and then again remist it and pull it back. And honestly, it looks seamless. Like you would never know that I did a little touch up to fix this side of the project. Here's a peek of what it's going to look like completed, but first I need to add a little bit of Big Top to seal the entire piece. The key here is what I recommend with a paint inlay is load up your paintbrush with your top coat and then with a very, very light hand apply the top coat. You do not want to put a lot of pressure on the paint inlay because you will smear it. Just like DIY paint can be reactivated with water, so can your paint inlay. Now that that's all dry, what I'm using is Tite Bond, and I am going to apply a bit of Tite Bond to the back side of this fork, and I am going to put it on that way. I had thought about drilling a hole and actually screwing it in, but I was going to try this first and see if it worked, and so far so good, guys. So I put a nice even coat of the Tite Bond to the very back side of the fork and then to the very tip of the fork. I let it dry very thoroughly and it is solid. I actually picked up the whole piece with the fork and I'm like, is it going to break off? And it didn't. For project 2, Connie from The Painted Photographer sent me a little gift in the mail a couple months ago, and it was just a wide variety of all her papers, and I still have a couple of them, and I thought today would be a perfect opportunity to use one up. I also always picking up books when I'm at the Goodwill bins. I am a sucker for old books, and this yellow one, I don't even know how long I've had it, but it caught my eye, and I thought this paper was going to be perfect for that book. So first and foremost, what I'm doing is I am using a bit of water, and I'm going to just I don't want a nice clean cut edge. I prefer to have like a torn look edge, and it is much easier to tear rice paper if it's a bit wet. So I'm just taking a brush and I am running a strip of water around the entire perimeter, and then I'm going to tear away the excess paper. And there are fibers in rice paper. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to tear because of that, but just take your time. And there was one spot where it tore a little wonky, but I'm embracing the imperfections, and in the end, you never even noticed it. First thing I'm going to do is take White Swan and I am going to just put it in the center because I want the paper to pop off of the yellow book, but then randomly kind of just add a little white here and there just to make it look like it's natural. And I'm going to do that on the front, and I'm also going to add a bit to the binding. Next, I'm going to lay my paper down and figure out exactly where I want it. And initially I was just going to go all in and just lay it down like this and add a bit of the queen bee. And then I got another idea, and that is what I love about creating is you're brainstorming as you're creating. You're trying to think of different things that you can do to your piece. I got these beautiful vintage pages from a friend named Jill, and when I grabbed the first piece, you guys, I kind of talked about it on my live today, but honestly, this said North Dakota. And if you guys have been following along during my Maker's Box launch, the only state that did not buy a Maker's Box was North Dakota. I'm like, this is a sign. This is definitely a sign that somebody in North Dakota needs to buy a Maker's Box. But what I'm doing here is I am just going to randomly tear, and I always try to tear towards me. It gives me better control, but I want to add just like a chunk on the top and a chunk on the bottom. Now that I figured that out, I am using liquid patina from DIY, and this is by far my favorite decoupage medium. And what I like to do is just apply a nice even coat of the liquid patina and then lay down my piece. And I'm using that for the paper, the vintage page paper and the rice paper. And once I lay it down, I smooth out the vintage paper, and then I add another layer of the decoupage medium over the top. I smooth that all out, and once I get the paper down on the top and the bottom, then I'm going to add the rice paper. So I determine where I want it, and then I'm going to lay it down. And what I do is I start by adding a bit what's called a starter strip. So I add a little bit and then I start smoothing out my paper, add more decoupage medium, and then work my way down. I let the book dry, and now I'm going in with a bit of Queen Bee. So the color that Connie used in the background of her paper was Queen Bee, so I thought I would go in with that DIY paint and just randomly add a little bit of Queen Bee here and there, and I think it just adds a good color contrast against the yellow of the book. So it's a different shade of yellow, and again, I'm adding just a little bit here and there, putting a little bit on the binding. I'm going to let that all dry, and then we're going to seal the entire piece. While that's drying, I just want to show you, I want to add this little tag to the front. I love buying these little wood tags, and you can add them to so many of your small pieces, and it just adds another element or a bit of dimension to whatever project you're adding it to. So I am using the Apothecary Labels stamp set, and this is from last IOD release, and I sold out within the first day, and then IOD sold out within like 2 days. So I was not able to get my hands on any more, but this month, fingers crossed, they will be getting the supply in, so I should have these available real soon. And you guys, this was one of my favorite sets of stamps during that release. I was so sad when it sold out so quick. It is perfect because it has 4 different fonts and they're tiny. They're perfect for your small pieces. I love how IOD has very large sets of stamps, and I also love that medium set of stamps, but these are perfect for all your small pieces like these little tags. I lay out all the letters and then I take a piece of thin mount and I pick them all up. And at that point, I was going to leave it just wood, and then I decided I needed to paint it. I have the letters picked up on the thin mount. I'm using the black ink from IOD. I ink it all up and then I lay it down and then rub all over each of the letters, and it gives a perfect impression of the word garden. Before I move any further, I do need to seal the entire piece. I'm using DIY's Big Top, and I am just applying a nice even coat of Big Top over the entire piece, letting it dry, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna add that little tag. I decided I was going to add just a little bit of twine to the tag, and I always keep any extra little twine that I have. I have a little bucket in my cabinet. I pulled out a chunk and I'm just going to tie a knot, and then I'm taking Type Bond and I am going to add a bit of Type Bond to the back of that tag, and I'm going to glue it on. For project 3, I have honestly had this for ages. I actually had a larger one and then this smaller one. The larger one, on one of my lives, I actually added a transfer and then I brought it up north, and it's in my cabin. It had all the different fish on it, and it's super cute. Now this one, I was planning on doing something similar, and I finally just said, you know what? I only need one at the cabin. I better get this out of my stash and into my booth. So today what I plan on doing is just adding this rose to it. And at first I wanted to add a couple layers. I was going to use some other smaller transfers from this book, and I was going to kind of layer it. And then finally, after I applied this, I made the decision just the rose. Sometimes simple is better. Now, if you have never used a transfer from IOD, it is so easy, you guys. You just pull out that backing, lay it down, and then take your transfer stick and just start rubbing. I always try to start in the center first and then work my way over. This is a slightly rounded surface, so that's what I tried to do. Otherwise, on a very flat surface, I lay it down and I start on one side and I work my way to the other. After the transfer is on, I take that backing and I burnish it. I really embed that transfer in my project. The last step is to apply a top coat of some kind to really protect and seal that transfer on your piece. I'm using Big Top and I am applying just one even coat over to the entire piece. Now keep in mind, all the products I'm using in today's video, you can order off of my website at www.sonnetsgardenblooms.com. I have a ton of supplies that I want to use up. So the theme of today's video, you guys, was I wanted to try to use up as many of those items. So Connie had sent me over some rice papers a while ago. I still have a few left, so it was perfect to use it on that yellow book. I also had just a little bit of that paint inlay left. Oh my gosh, that one has been so popular. And I absolutely love how just adding a little paint inlay completely transforms your piece. So I can't wait to hear what you guys think of today's video. Sometimes you don't have to go all elaborate to really change the look and feel of a piece. Just by adding that simple transfer, completely transformed that little container. I love it. The rose was perfect. I thought about adding a little bit more, and I'm like, sometimes simple is just better. So I am going to be softballing all weekend long, but I will be back Monday. I have another thrift to treasure. At this point, I have it started and I cannot wait to finish it. So hopefully there aren't any hiccups in the road this weekend and I can get that out for you on Monday evening at 5 o'clock. So if you guys haven't yet and you love my channel, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications so every time I upload a video, which is every Monday and Friday, you'll be notified. And if you like today's video, give me a thumbs up. I will also be back live on Monday at 6 o'clock on both Facebook and YouTube, and I'm going to have a guest. We are taking vintage windows and we're going to be upcycling them. So I have an idea and vision, and my friend Tara from the Reclaimed Ranch has one as well. So I hope you guys can join me for Monday's live. Like I said, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Have a great weekend and we'll see you guys then. Bye.